Oh, this is handy. Indeed, yes, there is. Okay, I've set up my Zoom so that I can see you all, or at least those of you who have cameras on, which is most of you, thankfully. So I might actually ask a couple of questions first, just to get a better sense of what experiences you've been having recently. Obviously, at the moment, this coronavirus thing is it's a fairly dominant topic of conversation all over the place. So I'll start with that, but not for long, I promise. Just as a sense, over the last couple of months, and I'm just going to ask you to literally just put your hand up, because I think I can see most of you, so don't worry about any technical stuff. Who's actually seen their business growing over the last couple of months? Have we got any? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 that I can see. Okay, good. Who then is confident that their business, as we return to an accelerated, or not return, but as we rebound and move back to fuller activity, who's confident that they've got a really good plan and it's happening, that they will actually be coming out of coronavirus with a stronger business than you went in with? Who's we got? Okay, a few. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's encouraging. Okay, and anyone just finding the whole thing bloody awful, and it's all trying, and you're sick of it, and you're exhausted, and it's all hard work? Okay. Oh, 2 hands. Excellent. We got someone who's definitely sick of it. Well, look, I'll start by warning you. This is not going to be, or at least my part of today is absolutely not going to be it's not a corona. How do you manage your business through this type of crisis? It's not, dare I say it, it's not even a broad look at how do you manage your business. I want to focus very specifically on how do you spot opportunities, and in some cases, how do you create the opportunities, with a particular focus on how do you do that during some sort of disruption, which in the end, this is just the next disruption for many people. Those of us who have been in business for a while, we've had various experiences. Some of us have been disrupted by technology. We might have been disrupted by myself definitely, disrupted by aircraft flying into tall buildings. This time we're being disrupted by a pandemic. It's another disruption. And so I'll focus on how to spot and find those opportunities, and in some cases create them. What I'm going to aim for is I will go through a bit of it's not a huge structure as such. It's a handful of questions really, but it's a framework that I've found helpful to find opportunities in the past, and indeed through this virus situation. My clients have certainly found it helpful and have come up with some interesting opportunities. So my hope is that you might go away with a framework of questions that you can use now. You can equally use in future to find opportunities. I will also, as I go through the questions, I will give examples of my clients at the moment. 9 out of 10 of my clients are coming out of this vastly stronger than they went into it. And so I'll try and give specific examples of things they've come up with. It'll cover a range of different industries. So it's possible you might also just hear something, I don't know, obviously I have no idea what industries you're all in, but you might get something, you might be in the same industry as them, and look, even if you hear an idea you can copy, go for it. It's all yours. So with any luck, you'll come away for the next hour with both a framework to use going forward in future, but also maybe some ideas you can use immediately. I will leave time for questions at the end. So please, as we go, if you have a question, you're welcome to just pop it into the chat box, and hopefully between Annalise and I, we'll work out how to access those at some point. Or alternatively, when we get to that time at the end, I will equally, you can put your hand up and just ask questions anyway. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions. First things first, though, I actually want to go back a little bit, and I'm going to try and share my screen with a bit of luck here. Host has disabled participant screen sharing. Annie, is there any chance I could be abled? Is there any chance I could share my screen? Is that something we can organise?
It should be.
It's not critical, but I want to I want to show you all sorts of photos of me. And you know, my day won't be as much fun if I can't show you pictures of me. But while that's coming up, don't worry. I'm not going to show you too many photos of me, but I do want to talk through just a couple of aspects of my background. Now Shirley has mentioned some of it, but I'm going to talk about it partly because I'll actually reference some of it as we go through. So it's better to understand a little bit of the story, helps you to know a little bit more about me, but also, as you'll soon see, my adult life has effectively been one extended crisis. In actual fact, technically, it's been multiple crises all lined up in a row. But as you'll see, looked at through a different perspective, they've all turned out to be good opportunities, and the whole thing looks like one great big wonderful opportunity after another. So I'll try and give you a bit of insight to that. Let me try. Here we go. This looks promising. Share that. Okie dokes. With any, can you nod or put your hand up if you can see my screen? It's a black screen that says crisis or opportunity. Thank you very much, Sean. Yvonne, I can see a couple of people waving. I no longer can see all of you, but I can see enough. Great. Let's get into it. Now, my professional career started working for an airline, Ansett Australia. I loved airlines, still do. Pretty ghastly business, and that was it was back in 2001. I was working at Ansett. I'd been a trainee there. I'd been there a couple of years, and the airline went bankrupt, as many do. So it was a pretty long and painful affair, and we all ended up with no jobs. Was the short story there, which was about the same time. It was actually a few months before the airline went bankrupt. I was out skiing one day, and I fell off a 100-foot cliff and died. I stopped breathing, and I broke all the bones from my waist up. And thankfully, I was rescued, and I was resuscitated. I was rebuilt from the waist up, and did recover fairly fully. But it did leave me at the end of 2001 with no job, and in the latter stages of recovering from, well, thankfully only near-death experience, but nonetheless a fairly catastrophic health experience for me. And I was sitting there, and I tried to think through, what am I going to do? Firstly, I started thinking about, should I get a job, or where do I want to get to? I tried to articulate some goals for my future. I had a lot of time lying around in hospital beds, of course, so I was able to think. It gave me a great deal of time to think. And part of what I decided to do was actually I needed to get better. I needed to learn. I wanted to get into business. I wanted to pursue business, but I didn't know all that much about it. So I decided to get an MBA, and was lucky enough. I was offered a spot at a business school in France, which is quite a good one. Did that a couple of years later. Well, it took a while to do it, but a couple of years later, finished that. And from that, got a job over in the UK, running a company. Someone asked me to turn around this business, not this one, and it went well, went fairly quickly. We turned it around, and they were able to sell it, which was good news for them. And that was, I wasn't the owner of that one, I might add. So I wasn't. Well, it was good for my CV, I suppose, but that was about it. And that's when I took over this company. It wasn't called Stella, it was called S8 at the time, but it was a travel agent turning over about sort of 50 million, losing 5 million. It was a crisis business. It was absolutely catastrophic business, but it was an opportunity. We thought it was an opportunity to turn it into something amazing, something bigger. And we're able over the next sort of couple of years, next 20 odd months, to take it from that size up to about 2 billion in sales, profitable, and as a consequence of which, the one photo I have put up there, I was invited to go and speak in the House of Lords, and dare I say it, at the time I found that quite an intimidating experience, having Winston Churchill looking over my shoulder, but now I have the experience of speaking to a group of people on the other side of the world, most of whom I can't see, and all of whom I get no sense of reaction at all from. So maybe that was the easy version of speaking. It was an exciting time though, and after that, I quit that, as it were. I by then was starting a family, had a wife and a little boy, wanted to get another one, so we decided to move back to Australia and started coaching just over 10 years ago. And yeah, you can see 2018, as Shirley mentioned, I was recognised as the Executive Coach of the Year worldwide, which was nice. I've written a few books. From my perspective now, it's I do still coach, but I spend a lot more time writing, researching, developing IP for business. I also host an event once a year, which may sound absolutely irrelevant, but you'll understand its relevance in a moment. Well, once a year, I gather 15 to 20 business owners, business leaders from around the world. We take out this magnificent chalet in the #1 ski resort in the world, which is in the Alps, in the French Alps. And we stay there for a week. And we do go skiing, it's nice, and we go, we eat and we drink, and all of that's nice as well. But we ostensibly spend the time doing 2 other things. And that's really where I'm going to end up today. We spend the time exploring questions about business and indeed personal development, but asking questions and trying to see where they lead us to. And one of the reasons we do it in that sort of environment is, in order to do it effectively, we need to be in the right sort of mindset. We need to have the right perspective. And the type of questions that we're going to talk through today, if you attack those at the end of a Thursday afternoon after a long day in the office, when you're exhausted, when you're surrounded by your team, where you're stressed, where you're in the frantic go of the business, your chance of having wonderful insight and coming up with a brilliant idea is pretty limited, to be honest. So in order to do these sorts of questions justice, in order to be able to get value from them, to have those insights, come up with those ideas, absolutely vital that you absolutely what we do in France. Good news is you don't have to go to France. You can do it at home. But I think it's important that before you really do launch into the questions, you are in the right mindset. And to me, in an ideal world, that is a mindset of flow. You actually get yourself into a flow state. Now, I'm not going to spend long going on about flow. I suspect some of you are already pretty familiar with it. Some of you are probably very good at it. But it does imply things like having space, having no interruptions, allowing sufficient time. You probably can't be in flow for much more than about 2 hours. Personally, I find 90 minutes is about my optimal. So it does mean getting away from everything and everyone else. That might be sitting out in the garden. It might be going for a walk on the beach. It might be, I'm not sure where you all like to get into your flow state of thinking, but choose your spots wisely, commit the time, and commit in particular to exploration for the first 10 minutes. To get into flow takes on average between 7 and 10 minutes. And I find this stuff I find usually pretty easy to procrastinate. God, you should see me when I'm writing. Procrastination is an easy thing for me to do. So I actually focus on 1 minute. I try and do it for 1 minute. And usually if I do it for 1 minute, I'm likely to make it for 10 minutes. And by then I'm in flow. So get yourself into flow, get clear on where you want to do it, when's good for you. Most people, of course, morning tends to be good for this. And celebrate the fact, for some of you, I know there's a lot of people, and I'll talk about some of my clients, at the moment we've got more free time anyway, so it's a great opportunity to actually commit some of it to thinking. The other aspect of mindset, that there's so much to mindset, and most of which I'm not going to spend any time on, but there is one other specific aspect that I think is vital at the moment in the context of crisis versus opportunity. When I've talked to people and when I've worked with clients on how best to work through this coronavirus situation, what I've seen a lot of is, what do I need to do now to survive? And that's critical, obviously. If your business doesn't survive through this period, then it's all a waste of time anyway. Next level, though, I've seen people saying, okay, I'm going to get creative about what I can do during this time. what I can do that'll be clever and helpful for the next whatever period of time it is, 2 months, 3 months, who knows. What I'm really suggesting, though, is that this is disruption. I mean, does anyone on the call actually know when this is finishing? Know when we're back to normal? Anyone? Because well, obviously it's a nonsensical question. We're not going back to it normal. We are normal now. We're at the new normal. Disruption has happened, and an awful lot of what we've all been forced into or we've decided to change is going to stay for a long time. So this is absolutely about getting your mindset into, right, I'm now planning for the next 5 years. I'm not planning for how do I survive coronavirus. Yes, I've had to do some things already to survive. This is about my business has a long trajectory ahead of it. And yep, that trajectory does look different than I thought it did 4 or 5 months ago. But now we're into the future. So great, you're on the beach, you've got time set aside, your mindset is primed for having ideas. Now really I want to go through some of these questions that I and my clients have found most useful. And they're in absolutely no order whatsoever. Go through all of them. Which one of them might trigger an idea is quite unpredictable. Go through them, leave it a few days, go through them again in a different environment, sleep on them for a couple of nights, and perhaps it's in the shower the next morning that the great idea will come. Prime your subconscious. I suspect most of you are familiar with the RAS, the reticular activating system. This is partly an activity, an exercise in getting that ready. Right, let's get underway. The first question, okay, I know it's 2 questions, but it's really one, is forcing yourself to dig as deep as possible and get as clear as possible on what your business's true core competencies are, and then how can you use them. And I'm going to reference a client I have in America. They put on huge events for big companies who are launching things or have big announcements. So there's kind of big communication. So for example, when Ford is launching a new vehicle, they take out these huge stadia and these guys will host the event, put it on, do all these sort of digital displays. It's quite spectacular, of course. When Game of Thrones is launching their next season, when Microsoft launches a new product, when the Consumer Electronics Show is on in Vegas, they put on these massive events. Now, of course, a couple of months ago, their revenue went from lots to 0 immediately because there are no big events anymore. And before, they would have always said our core competency is making sure these big events go well, which on the one hand was fair, it was not wrong. But they then thought about it more and they said, actually, one of our core competencies is design, because we put on those massive displays, we design those. Sometimes we're designing presentations for these people. Sometimes we're designing the whole event and how it flows together. We do lots of different design stuff. So I then got into a partnership with a company that offers some delivery software that enables, it's a communication software. Conceptually, it's like Zoom, but just vastly more sophisticated. Includes 3D stuff, augmented reality stuff. It's a souped up version of this. And they said, great, we're going to partner with those guys and we're going to design spectacular experiences and presentations and communications that just get delivered differently. So now they've got all these projects rolling in, each of which sort of $50,000 to $100,000 per project. And they've realized that's brilliant. That's a more scalable business model than our old one. It's a higher margin business model than our old one. And so one day, possibly, probably, we'll still do those big events. But actually, we'll start recruiting people into our team who can run this technology-based stuff. So they end up with a better business, not completely different, but a shift away. All of which came from getting some different items on the list of what their true core competencies were and how else they can use those. Next one I'm going to go to. Now, this one sounds a bit like how do I survive coronavirus? But it can lead to a lot more than what you need to survive coronavirus. And for this one, I'm going to talk about a recruitment company that that I work with, and they do sort of high-end executive recruitment. And in addition to that, it's been a secondary part of their business, but they also run, for these similar types of people, very senior executives, they run learning sets, which are a bit like, if anyone's familiar with EO or YPO, it's a bit like that. Sort of 10 executives get together once a quarter and spend a day or two together and share. And it's not, to be honest, entirely dissimilar to a growth club in a way. And they're going through, God, we can't, recruitment's dead at the moment. We can't get these people together because we're not allowed to get together. What are we going to do? And they said, actually, you know what we can do? We can, at the moment, people need more constant help from us. So we're going to do, instead of quarterly 2 days, we're going to do 2-hour sessions once a month. And that's going to be online, obviously. And we're going to do sprints. We're going to have every fortnight a quick catch-up session, which we'll facilitate for the urgent activity. We're going to productize this, and we're going to create an online brochure for it, and we're going to promote it actually quite aggressively out to our database. They've been terrified that all of their members would actually leave the sets, stop paying. They didn't lose any members, and suddenly they started getting new members, and people, even their existing members, started saying, well, hang on, actually, this is quite good, this model. We get to talk to you more. This is more helpful. And yeah, it's a shame we don't see you face to face, but actually this is more valuable to us. And is there any way you'd be able to work like this for our recruitment needs as well? So they quickly took their one-page online flyer, turned it into the recruitment version as well, and they've tripled their demand over the last 6 weeks of recruitment services. So once again, they did approach it. I'll be honest, they did approach it from what do we need to do now to survive? And once again, they've realized this is just a more profitable business for us. It's a higher margin. Suddenly we can get together with people, but we don't need the venue every time. We don't need the catering. We don't need the travel costs. They'll go back in the end, I believe, to a blended model. But they've done well through coronavirus, and they've gone into something which ends up being a better business anyway. So they simply asked, what can we do now? What do we need to change now? And it led to a longer term solution. Now the next one is probably a better long-term one in a sense, which is how can we use this opportunity? Now, some people have been forced to do this. We've been lucky in Australia. The government has provided reasonably good support for businesses. Not endless support, not unlimited support by any means, but a lot of businesses have at least been able to keep their head above water. And so they're using that opportunity to improve their business. And another client, actually it's another recruitment client, different business, but serious people, it's a bigger one. They're about, I guess there must be sort of 60 odd consultants in the business. And they've looked at it as an opportunity to completely change their internal processes. So on the one hand, yep, sure, they've been forced to work online and use Zoom, but that hasn't been a significant change for them. What they've done is change their internal processes. They've realised partly by working at home, they've been able to change some, but they actually realised that their entire process, they look at their customer journey from suspect to prospect to customer, which is buying once, to client, which is a repeat client, to account, which is a major repeat constant work for them. Their entire process across between each of those segments was duplicated. So they said, okay, well, let's remove that. And that took 20% of their cost base out of their business. Now, partly that came from simply having the time to sit down and look at their processes. But they made the decision that, well, we're having to change a little bit now, but actually let's take those small changes and use this as the opportunity to trigger much more significant changes that actually have nothing to do with coronavirus, but simply improves our business. So asking how you can use this crisis, you know, the saying, never waste a good crisis, how you can use little forced changes as an opportunity to make much bigger changes. internally within your business is another one to consider. Now, a fun one, which is lots of my clients, is what are the adjacent markets we can move into? And I think in the end, you can look, well, there's probably an unlimited range of ways you can look at this, but I'll give you a couple of examples again. I'll give you both segmentation examples, segmentation in terms of client type, and then I'll also give you segmentation opportunities in terms of geography. And look at one of the businesses, the first recruitment business I mentioned, that for them was a client level opportunity they spotted. When they designed, I talked about the learning sets, getting these groups of people together, and they designed this new, much more cost efficient model. They had the realization that actually, hang on a minute, at this cost base, we could do a lower price version, which is a lean version, which instead of, at the moment, all we're working, these sets involve basically chief executive officers of very large, principally, well, both public and private enterprises. We could bring this down to the next level of executive and the next level below that into just management levels. Our senior executives that we normally work with, they want that high level full on model. But if we've now got a leaner model, we can go down 2 levels. Brilliant. We've opened ourselves not only into 2 new markets, but each of those markets is on average 8 times the size of the level above it. This is multiplying our business. Now, another client who's looked from a segment perspective, customer segment, they took it purely on an industry basis. They're structural engineers, and they said at the moment most of our market is in the residential market. Really, they work with architects and so on, but in the end, it's driven by residential projects. And they said at the moment that's a completely disastrous market. It's died totally. But we don't want to be there anyway. So let's use this opportunity to shift. We can get some different conversations going with councils. We can get them going with the National Park Service. We can get them going in a different geography. They were based in the mountains, they're a couple of hours away in Sydney. We can, through those, end up in segments which are not only as big, if not bigger, but are more reliable long-term, offer a more interesting type of work. And the coronavirus situation gives us the opportunity to have conversations with them that ordinarily are just hard to begin. They also partnered with a geotech consultancy as a way of getting into one of those segments. So they've looked at it from shifting in terms of service lines, geography, level of business. You can segment in many ways. But what are the adjacencies? I've got a client, another engineering client, who they're very different. They do heavy vehicle and big machinery. They maintenance and engineering service for example, for mining companies, for large transport companies on these big vehicles and these big machines. Not all over Australia, but in the major mining centres and transport centres. And also they work on big ag equipment. Anyway, they realised in some of these mining centres, for example, up in the northwest of Australia, the Pilbara, it's a big sort of iron ore mining area. And they've got a big workshop in Karratha, which is really the main town there. And they realised that what they've done in the past, they've serviced all the companies that have offices in town, transport companies and mining companies. And it's very convenient for them because they're right there. But they said, actually, there's not another town, by the way, within hundreds of kilometres, but we've got a bit of spare time. We could just go out to any company that is operating within 100 kilometres, which in the context of this area, and by the way, not much like some of South Africa, but is nothing. And they went and spoke to a couple of other businesses, instantly picked up the work. And then they realised, we could drive 200 kilometres if we really tried hard, and the multiplication effect is significant. And they had a realisation, which goes back to my first question. They said, most of the workers up here are fly in, fly out. And at the moment, they can't fly in, fly out. So all the fly-in, fly-out operators are having a real problem. Our workforce is entirely based up here. So they realise that actually one of our core competencies is simply having their staff local. So they combine those two. They put out a campaign emphasising the local staff. They put it out in the end to 300 kilometres beyond, and that's where their growth has come from. So they've had, March was their, they've been going a long time. They've got, you know, they've got a couple of hundred people around the country. March was their record month ever, and they were celebrating it and equally saying, but let's not celebrate because now we're going to be slammed by coronavirus. And then in April, they absolutely destroyed their record. They killed it by even further. So that was a combination of different of these questions that led to what is turning into a much bigger business than it was 3 months ago. And we'll go forward that way. Now, this one should be an obvious one, I suppose. At the moment, there are plenty of weak businesses out there. Many of them actually were weak before this, and they've just got weaker during. How do we pick up their business? Now, that can take lots of different forms, I suppose. It can be as simple as just targeting effectively with your marketing activity. And the example I want to use there, because it illustrates to me a couple of points in this process, is a driving school I work with. It's Australia's largest driving school. And they are another great example of a business that went from very strong to zero overnight. Because I don't know what's been done there, but here the government actually banned driving driving tests, and they implemented with your social distancing a 1.5 metre distancing requirement, so driving lessons were no longer possible. And so these guys went to zero very quickly. And now, as the here again, the process laid out, when the first thing that was allowed was you could get together with one person. Two people could get together. So there were still no driving tests, but driving lessons were allowed. And so what they decided to do was to go out there and target the areas they knew were dominated by sole trader and very small driving schools, because who obviously would struggle desperately through this. They were equally mindful. They were a bit nervous about the perception of going out too aggressively during this sort of coronavirus time. They didn't want to appear to be ruthless, and they didn't want to be ruthless. But they've got a business. They've got more people to feed. They've got more staff to keep going. And so they took an approach to marketing. How they designed it, they said, and I'm stealing their words here, we do want to press, but we'll always press respectfully. So they took the view that we do need to go out there, we do need to get going, and they're on track by the end of June to be back up to their pre-COVID levels. And that was simply an example of targeting where they knew the weakness was, and accepting that whilst it felt a bit uncomfortable in a way, there was an important need to do it, and they would always do it with respect. Do it with respect in how in particular they communicated. So that was the approach they took. Now, I've mentioned a couple of supplier or partner opportunities already, but the example I want to give here, because it's a different one, is one from my own experience. When I took over that ghastly business in the UK, losing all that money, we had a particular idea that we were going to position ourselves as an real expertise in long haul travel, in particular to Australia, and it was a wholesale business largely, and it had some retail shops, but they were ghastly, they were terrible. It was where all the money was lost. And so we decided what we wanted to do was to buy a very good retail and wholesale tour operator that had the right specialisation. It had a strong brand. It was a good business. It was one I knew well, and we thought that if we put that and we put them all together, we'll merge it effectively. We'll lose some costs, and it'll be a good idea. However, unfortunately, that of course being quite a good business was an expensive one to buy, and we didn't have any money because we were losing so much. And we brainstormed desperately and thought, how can we pull this off? And it so happened that brand, and it was a good brand, and they turned over, I think at the time they turned over something like 300 odd million, let's say. they didn't sell any Virgin product. You know, Richard Branson, they didn't. It was a tour operator and a retail travel business, but they didn't sell Virgin Holidays, Virgin Atlantic, and the various Virgin holiday brands. So we approached Virgin, had a great conversation with them, and in the end, they offered to give us the money to buy the company. Not lend it to us, not take equity in our business, simply gift us the money. On one condition, that we would start to promote their products as well as the other products. Not only would we promote South African Airways and Qantas, we would also promote Virgin Atlantic. We would promote Virgin Holidays as well as promoting TUI or Thomas Cook or whatever brands we were promoting elsewhere. Now, that's an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity that exists in so many situations. The engineering company, the mining engineering company I talked about, he's bought a number of businesses around Australia in a not an identical way. In sometimes it's an identical way. He's found a supplier who he could really support, he could really get behind, and they would get benefit from it. A tractor brand, John Deere, Case New Holland. Who's the other one? Deutz Fahr. I think I'm no tractor seller, I'm afraid. He went to those and found one who said, yeah, actually, we want to expand our business up in northwest New South Wales. And they got behind him and helped him to buy the company. Finding suppliers and customers who can really go the distance with you. Now is a wonderful time where they need help as well. Find ways to help each other and end up in a partnership, which will be, on the one hand, it'll probably help you now, but it means that you will come out of this process a vastly stronger business than you went into it. It doesn't mean you have to get into joint ventures and equity partnerships. You don't have to buy them. Those are just examples. But find those businesses that you can genuinely get into bed with in some form so that both of you come out of this stronger than you went into it. Think of who else can benefit from you. Who else can you benefit from? Okay, this is a bit of a different question. This is purely a time question. We've got free time for some people. Obviously, for those of you who are still growing, this probably won't be as relevant. For those of you who are finding things pretty tight at the moment, be intentional. How do you use that free time? You know, the driving school I mentioned before, when they went into this process, they realised they'd have more free time. The government was offering enough support that their staff could stay on a kind of a basic level of money, not a good wage, I wouldn't say, but they could stay alive and no one had anything else to do. So they divided up their team and said, righto, you two people are going to improve our onboarding induction process for new customers. You two people are going to examine our internal processes and see where you can improve them. The rest of the team, led by one manager, you are going to work out how we can accelerate our pivot to become a full platform business nationwide. Now, out of that took place, that happened 2 months ago, that conversation. They will launch their platform business in the next fortnight. They said, we're going to have some time. For God's sake, let's use it well. So almost no limit to what you can do with it. What will become available? You know, the engineering company have picked up staff, the engineering company I mentioned. An IT, actually a software business, 60 odd staff, pretty good business. They haven't really suffered during this at all. It's been a pretty comfortable existence for them. But in the process, Dane, the company's called Formation. You can look it up. It's a very, very impressive business. Dane is the owner. He's been able to recruit he wants a leadership team of 5 senior people. He's recruited 2 of them in the last 3 weeks. There's just talent becoming available. Another type of engineering company I'm working with, a steel fabrication company, Synergy Engineering, Synergy Construction. They're using this as an opportunity to buy a competitor because they can. Their business has stayed okay during it, and obviously there are others out there who have struggled more. So take this opportunity, find what's available. And if you're in a position, get creative with the deal as they are with their acquisition. Sometimes you'll have to get creative to make the deal happen at the moment. But there are such wonderful opportunities out there at the moment. Don't, yeah, as I said before, don't waste the crisis. This one's a simple one. I'll be honest, I don't know the detail of what's happening in South Africa, so I won't speak to it much. Obviously, if the government's offering you money, use it. For some people, using this opportunity to get more funding is a great one. One of my clients, they're a payments processing business, like payment security gateway, for those of you familiar with the industry. They process transactions. So again, they've done pretty well through this, hasn't been a real issue for them. But they've got an opportunity to go huge. They've got a great technology and they've got an opportunity to scale it up. So they use the opportunity to walk into a bank with the spectacular interest rates that are available at the moment, virtually zero. Banks are getting even some government guarantees to lend even more. So they've just grabbed extra funding as a way of accelerating their growth. They're purely using it to recruit more salespeople. So it's a great opportunity. I don't think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, but some of the funding that you can get at the moment is, put it this way, it's the only time it's been around in my business career so far. So it's another opportunity. Use that. Now that does bring me to the last question, and I'll close on this one. How will we win the recovery? Partly everything I've talked about could lead to how you're going to win your recovery. But there's a final point I want to make on this one. We're obviously not going to go back to any sort of pre-normal. We're not going back to where we were 4, 5, 6 months ago. Now is what it is. Much of what we're experiencing now will remain. However, the acceleration will come. A rebound will come. Different timing in different markets, different industries. And being well prepared for that is critical in this process. Many people will still be asleep at the wheel. Having your campaigns ready, using this period now to position yourself. A company I work with, a coach who pioneered breathing walls, green wall technology. They've used this opportunity to embed their relationships into new, primarily government, but also infrastructure segments. So their industry hasn't seen the rebound yet. But the moment the government pulls the trigger on major projects such as new highways, new car parks, which will inevitably be part of the government-funded rebound, they will win that work. University work, positioning themselves for data centres. They've picked their segments and they've embedded themselves with relationships. They haven't got the work yet, but they will. Another company, one of the recruitment companies I talked about, they've been very intentional and in massive detail gone down to their, top 20 clients was the easy bit, but client by client going down through their database. And this was the bigger company I referenced, the one with 60 consultants. And they've prepared different campaigns, some of which they're already starting to drip out there, value add campaigns, and then they're ready with the more hunting type campaigns, segment by segment, market by market. How do they manage those relationships? How do they position themselves now? And then at the right moment, how do they pull the trigger to win the recovery? So some of winning the recovery is building a great business. In the meantime, building a better business, making some of those changes. Some of it is just being incredibly quick when the opportunity arises, as that rebound comes, as it inevitably will. It won't be going back to normal, but there will still be a rebound. Now, hopefully somewhere in that mix, you've either found some questions that might be useful at some point, or you've even picked up an idea. Whether they're questions you use now to come up with opportunities, or they're simply questions you use. I don't think any of those questions apply just to COVID. They're pretty generic questions that you can always use to find opportunities. Get your mindset in the right space. Give yourself the opportunity, and give yourself that time to come up with the ideas. And hopefully they might help you to come up with something valuable as a new opportunity for your business. Now, with that, I might stop sharing my screen. And hopefully we've still got 10 minutes or so. And let me see, can I?
Yeah, so could we ask anyone who's got some questions for Andrew, either put it in the chat or just